When a supposed DNA leak about Barron Trump hit the internet, everyone expected silence, but what Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett said next turned outrage into respect, and exposed a truth no one saw coming. It started with one tweet. Just one. A grainy screenshot claiming to show Barron Trump's DNA results surfaced late one Thursday night, posted by an anonymous account with fewer than 100 followers. Within an hour, it had been shared thousands of times. By morning, it was everywhere. TikTok feeds, Reddit threads, late-night TV monologues. Nobody knew if it was real, but that didn't matter. The story had already escaped into the wild, feeding on curiosity, hate, and shock. It had no mercy for truth. By 8 a.m. Eastern Time, hashtags like #BarronDNA and #TrumpLeak were trending. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Some blamed political enemies for hacking, others insisted it was the work of insiders. A few conspiracy channels even claimed the leak proved hidden family secrets. The screenshot looked legitimate enough to fool most people. Charts, names, even a fake government watermark. But what made it worse was that it felt believable in the climate America was living in, a mix of outrage, suspicion, and endless online noise. In Palm Beach, Florida, phones were ringing non-stop inside Mar-a-Lago. Staff members whispered in corners, unsure whether to bring the news to Melania yet, but she already knew. Someone had forwarded her the post with a single message: "Seen this?" She didn't reply. That morning, Melania moved through the residence quietly, sharply. She didn't raise her voice, but every question she asked cut deep. Where did this come from? Who had access to our files? Is my son safe? Those around her said she looked less angry and more betrayed, not just by whoever created the fake DNA file, but by a world willing to turn something so intimate into a political weapon. Her assistant, Kara Novak, tried to stay calm. "Ma'am, we're checking everything. We'll have a statement ready soon." Melania's reply was cold: "No statement. Not yet. Every word we say becomes another headline." But even as she tried to contain the damage, the chaos outside was spiraling. News networks ran breaking banners without confirmation. Podcasters speculated about Barron's health, some even joked about it for clicks. What no one realized was how close this was to crossing a line that should never be crossed, using a teenager's privacy for entertainment. Meanwhile, in Washington, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat in her office watching the same viral clip play on her muted TV. She leaned back in her chair, brows drawn together, frustration, not judgment. "This is how it starts," she muttered. "First it's gossip, then it's poison." Her communications director, Andre Fields, turned toward her. "You want to respond?" Everyone else is either laughing or pretending it's not happening. Jasmine hesitated. She wasn't close to the Trumps politically, couldn't be further apart, but something about this story felt different, personal, invasive, wrong. "No," she said finally. "Not yet. If I speak, it has to mean something." Across the country, the online storm kept growing. Commentators uploaded videos titled, "DNA Leak Proves Everything We Suspected." Political analysts called it a dangerous new low in campaign warfare. In one heated segment, a host even asked whether the first family's privacy was fair game in the name of transparency. For Melania, the situation became unbearable. The next morning, a photo surfaced of her leaving Mar-a-Lago, tense expression, dark sunglasses. Paparazzi shouted questions, but she kept walking. The headlines wrote themselves: Melania furious over DNA leak. Back at home, Barron was said to have locked himself in his room. He wasn't a public figure, but the internet treated him like one. His friends texted screenshots, memes spread everywhere. He barely spoke. Melania made one call to her husband's legal team, and another to an old contact at the FBI. Her voice was steady, but her message was clear: find whoever did this. I don't care who it is. But somewhere in that chaos, a quiet idea began to form, a possibility that not everyone would rush to exploit the story. In the noise of outrage, one voice was preparing to speak with reason, and when she did, everything would change. But before that moment, the world had to see just how ugly things would get when politics met personal privacy. The gates of Mar-a-Lago stayed shut that evening. Reporters crowded outside, shouting questions no one answered. Inside, the mood was cold and silent, the kind of silence that follows betrayal. Melania sat in the gold-accented living room, her phone face down as if it had been contaminated. Every few seconds, the screen lit up with notifications, journalists, advisors, old acquaintances pretending to check in. She didn't touch it. Kara Novak stood nearby, holding a printed stack of tweets, headlines, and screenshots. It's bad, she said softly. They're saying the leak came from a federal database, but that doesn't even make sense. It's fake. We know it's fake. Melania exhaled, barely moving. They don't care if it's fake. They care that people are talking. The lawyers want to issue a statement, Kara added. No, Melania said, her voice firm. The moment we speak, they twist it. They'll say we're hiding something. She walked toward the window overlooking the dark Palm Beach sky. The world outside felt cruel and small, strangers debating her son's genetics for sport. That was the line crossed too far. Her frustration wasn't just about the gossip, it was about control. For years, she built walls of privacy around her family. Now those walls were crumbling because of a rumor started by anonymous accounts hiding behind fake usernames. Barron hadn't left his room all day. 16, tall, quiet, uncomfortable with attention, when she knocked on his door earlier. He didn't answer. She heard the low sound of muted videos playing from his laptop, probably people talking about him, analyzing every detail. She remembered whispering through the door, "Don't read what they say. None of it matters." But even she knew how impossible that was. Later that night, Donald called. He was in New Jersey meeting with advisors about upcoming campaign events. "We'll sue them," he said immediately. "Every single one of them. You can't let them drag our boy into this." Melania's tone stayed even. "They already have." There was a pause on the line. "You think Jasmine Crockett's behind this? Her people love this kind of thing." "No," Melania said, her voice cold. "Don't go after her. She's not the one doing this." Donald sighed, frustrated. "Then who? Someone's gotta pay for this mess." She hung up soon after. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that the problem wasn't one person, that IT was the entire system, a machine that rewarded humiliation. The internet didn't care who it hurt as long as people kept watching. Meanwhile, inside White House correspondence circles and online political boards, speculation ran wild. A podcast based in Des Moines uploaded an episode titled, "Barron Trump's DNA Leak, What It Could Mean." They had no proof, but that never stopped them from theorizing. Across the country, a small team of journalists in Los Angeles started digging into the source of the screenshots. One of them, Eli Raymond, noticed inconsistencies in the timestamps. These were fabricated, he told his editor. But someone went to a lot of trouble to make them look real. The editor shrugged. "Truth doesn't trend, Eli. Save it for the follow-up." Back in Washington, Jasmine Crockett stayed quiet publicly, but privately, she couldn't let it go. She scrolled through thread after thread, watching people tear apart a family's private life. "This isn't politics," she said under her breath. "This is cruelty." Andre, her communications director, leaned against her doorway. "We can issue a statement. Condemn it. Maybe call for digital privacy reform. It'll make headlines." Jasmine shook her head. "Not yet. If I speak, it has to be about more than defending a family name. It has to be about everyone who's had their life turned into entertainment." Andre hesitated. "You'll take heat for that." She smiled faintly. "Then let them bring it." That night, as she walked past the Capitol building, the city lights felt sharper than usual. The same internet that destroyed reputations overnight could also shift narratives, if you used it right. She didn't know it yet, but her silence before speaking would become the calm before a storm that worked in her favor. But before Jasmine could act, the noise had to reach its breaking point, and for Melania, that breaking point was only hours away. By Friday morning, the chaos had reached every corner of the country. News anchors spoke about the DNA leak like it was a national crisis. Cable channels ran side-by-side comparisons of supposed documents, while political pundits speculated endlessly. They didn't have proof. But proof no longer mattered. Attention did. A morning show in Dallas devoted nearly 20 minutes to it, bringing in experts who clearly hadn't read a single verified report. "If this leak is real," one commentator said with exaggerated concern, "it raises questions about what else the Trump family might be hiding." Another smirked and added, "Or maybe it just shows how desperate people are for relevance." Even the audience looked uncomfortable. the hosts were treating a teenager's medical privacy like a soap opera twist that in Los Angeles, journalist Eli Raymond kept chasing the story's origins. His instincts told him something was off. He traced metadata back to a user in Toledo, Ohio, who claimed to be a digital activist, but the deeper he looked, the stranger it got. The account had been created only 2 days before the leak. Someone planned this, Eli told his editor. They wanted it to look real just long enough to cause damage. So you're saying it's fake? The editor asked. I'm saying it's designed to feel real. In Palm Beach, Melania watched the same segment on television, her hands clasped tight. The people on screen spoke about her son like he was a character, not a boy. Kara stood behind her. Quiet, this will pass, Kara whispered. No, Melania replied. They'll move on when someone else gets hurt. Across the political world, reactions split sharply. Trump supporters blamed Democrats, opponents called it karma. The fact that nobody had confirmed anything was lost in the noise that in her D.C. apartment. Jasmine turned off her TV. It's disgusting, she muttered, pushing her breakfast aside. Andre, who had stopped by, shook his head. They've turned it into entertainment. If you speak now, you'll be drowned out by the circus. Maybe, she said. But silence makes me part of it. Her phone buzzed, another lawmaker warning her, stay out of this. It's radioactive, but Jasmine had never run from a fire. She remembered growing up in Baton Rouge, watching her parents fight school officials after private family details were leaked during a local campaign. When people can't win with truth, her mother had said, they reach for gossip. Those words echoed in her mind. That afternoon, a new leak hit the internet. A supposed audio clip of Melania yelling at staff. The voice didn't quite match, but millions shared it anyway. Hashtags exploded again. Melania meltdown dominated the news. Jasmine watched the frenzy unfold in real time. They're breaking her, she whispered. Andre looked at her carefully. You sure you want to be the one to defend her? That's political suicide. I'm not defending her, Jasmine said. I'm defending what's right. Meanwhile, in Mar-a-Lago, Melania's patience finally snapped. She gathered her security team and demanded updates. Tell me who did this, she ordered. Tell me who thinks they can touch my son. Her voice was icy and controlled, but every word carried weight. The staff had never seen her so composed, and yet so furious. The Secret Service confirmed they were coordinating with cybersecurity units. One agent mentioned that the fake documents had been uploaded through servers in Eastern Europe, likely part of a broader misinformation campaign. Melania's face hardened. So we're pawns in someone's game. No one answered. While the investigation crawled forward, the online firestorm continued spreading. Talk shows compared Melania's reaction to other political spouses. Memes portrayed Barron as both victim and villain. It wasn't news anymore, it was digital chaos. But in the middle of it all, something unexpected began to happen. People who rarely agreed on anything started asking the same question. When did we stop caring about privacy? A few high-profile journalists condemned the leak, calling it a violation of basic decency. One of them was Eli Raymond. He tweeted, you can hate politics all you want, but dragging a kid's medical data into it? That's not journalism. That's exploitation. The post went viral, thousands retweeted it, some even tagged Jasmine Crockett, urging her to speak out. Andre showed her the post that evening. They're calling your name now. Jasmine read the comments, her mind already made up. Then tomorrow, she said, they'll hear my voice. But before the world could hear Jasmine's words, it would witness the damage that silence and speculation had already caused, especially for Melania and Barron. Saturday morning came heavy with noise. The country had spent 2 straight days obsessed with a story that had no proof, no source, and no compassion. Even the people who didn't believe the leak were tired of hearing about it. It felt like everyone was waiting for someone, anyone, to finally say something that made sense. That's when Jasmine Crockett made her move. She called an early press briefing from her Capitol Hill office. No fanfare, no rehearsed talking points. Reporters expected a political jab, a headline-friendly sound bite. What they got instead was something rare, sincerity. When Jasmine walked into the room, she wasn't wearing her usual tailored blazer. She looked less like a politician ready for performance and more like a person ready for a conversation. Cameras clicked, microphones angled toward her, and every journalist in the cramped room leaned forward. She took a breath. Before I start, I want to make something very clear, she said. This is not about parties, this is not about elections, this is about what we've allowed politics to become. The room fell silent. Over the past 48 hours, she continued, I've watched our media, our social networks, and even some of my colleagues turn a child's private information into entertainment. And I have to ask, when did we lose our sense of boundaries? She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to, the calm made every word hit harder. A reporter cut in, Congresswoman Crockett, are you defending the Trumps? Jasmine offered a faint, controlled smile, I'm defending decency. I'm defending the right of every parent to protect their child from political games. Whether you agree with the Trumps or not, dragging a 16-year-old into headlines for clicks is wrong. It's not journalism. It's cruelty disguised as curiosity. That clip would replay millions of times later that day, but in the moment, the room was so quiet you could hear pens scratching across notepads. She went on, I've been in politics long enough to know that privacy doesn't really exist anymore, not for public figures, not for their families, not for anyone who ends up in the wrong screenshot, but there's a difference between transparency and violation. Transparency keeps us accountable. Violation destroys trust. And when we destroy trust, we destroy the fabric that holds this country together. Andre stood at the back of the room, watching faces shift, some uncomfortable, some impressed, a few even guilty. Another reporter asked, so what are you asking for, Congresswoman? I'm asking for restraint, Jasmine replied. I'm asking every journalist, every social media user, every politician, stop feeding the machine that profits from humiliation. You can oppose someone's beliefs without targeting their children, you can debate policies without turning people into props. She glanced at the cameras. If this is the kind of politics we're building, then we're all complicit. Her entire statement lasted only 7 minutes, but it broke the rhythm of chaos. Within an hour, news outlets that had spent days milking the story began shifting their tone. Major networks replayed her clip under headlines like, Crockett calls for humanity in politics, and, a rare voice of reason amid scandal. In Palm Beach, Melania watched the footage on her living room TV. She didn't say much, but Kara noticed her expression soften. She said what I wanted to say, Melania murmured. Kara smiled. Maybe people will start listening. Back in Washington, Jasmine returned to her office. Her phone was overflowing, journalists requesting interviews, parents thanking her, even a few conservative voices acknowledging her courage. Andre leaned against the doorway, grinning, well, you just made half the internet furious and the other half emotional. That's usually a sign you did something right. Jasmine laughed. I didn't plan for it to go viral. Doesn't matter. It's the first time in days people are talking about the problem instead of the scandal. By evening, hashtags like #ProtectBarron and #PrivacyMatters were trending. For once, the internet seemed to agree on something. Comment sections filled with parents sharing their own stories, kids getting bullied, personal data exposed. How the internet had slowly erased the idea of personal space. It didn't feel political anymore, just painfully human. Even in conservative circles, the tone had shifted. On a Texas radio station, a longtime commentator admitted, can't believe I'm agreeing with her, but Crockett's right. This whole thing spiraled out of control. Leave the kid alone. That night, Jasmine sat in her apartment, the room dim except for the glow of her laptop. She scrolled through the flood of reactions, articles, clips, angry posts, grateful ones. Then she found a message that stopped her. Thumb.no username. No profile picture. Just a single line, you didn't have to say any of that. But you did. Thank you. Jasmine closed the laptop and let a small smile surface. She didn't need to know who sent it. What mattered was that someone heard her. But while Jasmine's honesty was reshaping the conversation, powerful figures were still maneuvering behind the scenes, trying to regain control of a story that had slipped through their fingers. By Sunday evening, the momentum around Jasmine Crockett's remarks hadn't faded, it had intensified. News channels replayed her 7-minute statement non-stop. Social media was a wildfire of commentary, and journalists who had spent days mocking the Trumps were now dissecting Jasmine's tone as if she'd just redrawn the boundaries of political discourse. Producers from every network began calling, each one eager to book her. At first, Jasmine declined. The last thing she wanted was to turn sincerity into another media spectacle, but then the request came from Caroline Weaver, a respected anchor known for depth, not drama. Caroline wasn't chasing a viral moment. She wanted a real conversation. Jasmine accepted. The live interview was set for Monday night on WHDN News in Philadelphia, one of the biggest broadcasts of her career. Under the warm studio lights, Jasmine sat opposite Caroline, wearing a simple navy suit, steady and composed. Caroline opened gently. "Congresswoman Crockett, your statement yesterday resonated across the political spectrum. Why speak out when so many chose not to?" Jasmine answered without hesitation, "Because silence lets cruelty thrive. What happened to Barron Trump isn't just about one family. It's a mirror of who we've become, turning someone's private pain into public entertainment. That's not who we should be." Caroline nodded. "Some critics say you're defending a family that's been hostile toward your party. What do you say to them?" Jasmine offered a small, calm smile. "I didn't defend a party. I defended a principle. Privacy isn't red or blue, it's human. And when we forget that, we lose something far more important than a political point. We lose our humanity." The studio audience, usually silent, broke into a quiet wave of applause. Caroline let it happen. She knew authenticity when she saw it. Then she leaned in. "Do you believe this could be a turning point? A moment where everyone steps back and reassesses how far we've gone?" "I hope so," Jasmine replied. "But it starts with accountability. The platforms that amplify lies. The media that rewards outrage. They're shaping how we see the world. If we don't demand better, then shame on us." For the next 10 minutes, Jasmine walked a tightrope most politicians avoided. She condemned misinformation without assigning partisan blame. She denounced harassment without hiding behind slogans. She spoke about empathy in a way that felt lived, not scripted. Midway through, Caroline aired a montage of the chaos since the leak: headlines, tweets, shouting matches, and parents describing the pain of seeing their children humiliated online. When the screen faded back, Jasmine inhaled slowly. "We watched it unfold," she said. "The same people who mocked a child yesterday are pretending to care about decency today. That's the problem. We treat outrage as entertainment. There's no consistency. No conscience. The only way to change that is to stop feeding it." The moment hung heavy. Even the control room staff stopped moving. Caroline asked one last question: "If you could say something to Melania Trump right now, what would it be?" Jasmine hesitated, then lowered her eyes. "As a woman, as someone who knows what it's like to live under constant scrutiny, I'm sorry this happened. No mother should have to watch her child become content for strangers. She's doing what any mother would do, protecting her family." Caroline didn't speak. She just nodded, letting the words settle. The segment ended not with applause, but with a quiet that felt like reflection. Within hours, the interview exploded online. Viewers called it the most genuine political moment of the year. Commentators on both sides praised her composure. Even conservative networks ran the headline: "Jasmine Crockett defends privacy and earns respect at in Palm Beach." Melania watched from her bedroom. Cara slipped in halfway through and stood by the door. When the interview ended, Melania spoke softly, almost as though she wasn't meant to be heard. "She understands." Cara stepped closer. "You mean Jasmine?" Melania nodded. "Yes, she understands what it feels like to be misunderstood." Across the country, people who had never once cared about Capitol Hill politics were suddenly paying attention. Were suddenly typing, "Who is Jasmine Crockett?" into search bars. Her approval numbers jumped overnight. Pollsters would later call it the Crockett effect, the rare moment when empathy, something almost extinct in politics, actually won people over. But while the interview cooled the public frenzy, something more calculated was forming behind closed doors. Someone out there intended to twist Jasmine's rising influence into something they could control. The morning after the interview, America woke to a different kind of news cycle. For the first time in nearly a week, the headlines weren't fueled by scandal or outrage. They were reflective. At breakfast tables from Phoenix to Tampa, newspapers displayed nearly identical titles: "Crockett restores humanity to politics." Cable analysts who had mocked the Trumps days earlier were now asking whether Jasmine had just reset the political temperature. Some held back on praise, but even they couldn't deny the shift that in a WHDN newsroom meeting. Caroline Weaver's producer studied the fresh ratings, 4.8 million live viewers, he announced. Highest midweek political segment this quarter. Caroline lifted a brow, people are craving decency. Imagine that. Across social media, the narrative had flipped, hashtag Crockett speaks truth and hashtag decency is power climbed the trending lists. Memes that once attacked Barron Trump were replaced with stark black and white graphics displaying Jasmine's quotes, privacy isn't Republican or Democrat. It's human.it felt unreal, like the country had paused for breath, but not everyone liked where things were heading. Behind the scenes, political operatives scrambled. In Washington, a private meeting at a conservative communications firm unfolded that afternoon. Trent Maxwell, the lead strategist, clicked through slides showing polls, comment threads, and media reactions. She's gaining cross-party traction, he said. If this continues, she'll be impossible to hit by midterms. We can't let that narrative lock in. A nervous junior staffer spoke up, directly attacking her could backfire. She defended the Trumps. Trent smirked, we don't attack her. We question her. He wrote a single word on the whiteboard, motives. Under it he added, timing. Political gain. Those phrases would soon ripple through blogs, opinion shows, and talk radio. Soft, suggestive doubts meant to dull her momentum. Meanwhile at Mar-a-Lago, Melania's tone softened in a way no one expected. Days of anger had hardened into reflection. After watching Jasmine's interview, she quietly asked Cara to draft a thank you note, simple, handwritten, sincere. Cara hesitated, are you sure? People might twist it. Melania offered a small, weary smile, everything is twisted. But kindness doesn't need approval. The note never made it into Jasmine's hands. Someone high in the Trump orbit advised Melania to hold it back. Still, whispers of it traveled through mutual contacts in D.C. 2 days later. During a meeting with her staff, Jasmine heard about it. Really? She asked, genuinely surprised. She was going to write? Andre nodded, apparently yes. I think she respects what you said. Jasmine leaned back, exhaling slowly. That means more than any headline. But the political machine didn't slow down. Commentators dissected everything about her, her past votes, her record, her tone. Some praised her authenticity, others hunted for inconsistencies. On a Cleveland podcast, a host asked, do you honestly think Crockett spoke from the heart, or was she positioning herself for something bigger? The phone lines jammed, callers divided, shouting opinions, defending her, doubting her. The debate itself went viral. Jasmine stayed silent. She understood the landscape. The same media that lifted you could turn overnight and tear you apart, but she sensed something had shifted. People weren't hearing politics the way they used to. Late one night, she stood on her office balcony with Andre, looking out at the Capitol dome glowing against the cool air. You think this moment lasts? Andre asked. Moments don't last, she said softly. But meaning can, if we give it one. Andre nodded. You might have just changed the way people view politics. She smiled, though exhaustion lingered in her eyes, or maybe I just reminded them what it should look like. Elsewhere, Eli Raymond, the journalist in Los Angeles, quietly continued his investigation into the original leak that he had uncovered enough digital breadcrumbs to prove the documents were fabricated. But what shocked him was who funded the operation, a cluster of anonymous accounts linked to a media marketing group with past ties to political action committees. This wasn't chaos. It was deliberate, that a crafted weapon. Eli knew the story could blow everything open, but he needed verification. His next move would be reaching out to Jasmine's office. By midweek, Jasmine's approval ratings had jumped nearly 12 points nationwide. Her social media following had doubled. Networks that once ignored her now called her a moral compass in Congress, but Jasmine wasn't celebrating. She wasn't fooled by momentum. Andre noticed her quiet mood. You don't seem happy about all this. Attention doesn't equal trust, she said. I'd rather earn that slowly. He chuckled. You might not get the option. She gave a tired grin. Then I'll handle it. But even as the country exhaled, Eli's findings were about to ignite the conversation again, revealing that the leak wasn't an accident or a rumor gone wild, but a targeted strike meant to hit both the Trumps and Jasmine. 2 weeks after the storm began, Things looked calm on the surface, but Washington buzzed with tension. Journalists whispered in coffee shops, aides stayed late in dim congressional offices. Political consultants worked the phones long after midnight. Everyone wanted to know who planted the fake DNA leak, and at the center of it all stood Eli Raymond, the one journalist who refused to let the truth be buried. He had traced a trail of digital breadcrumbs that all pointed to one place, a firm called Blue Core Strategies, a data marketing outfit based in Cincinnati, Ohio. On paper they ran online promo campaigns for small local brands, but Eli had followed money moving quietly through shell accounts linked to political operatives known for engineered smear operations. His apartment was cluttered with printouts, sticky notes, glowing monitors, and half-finished cups of coffee. In one screen 2 names kept flashing. One tied to a conservative donor network, the other connected to a media outlet that had conveniently surged during the chaos. It felt too aligned to be random. Eli picked up the phone and called his editor. "I've got something," he said, "but if I publish without airtight proof they'll destroy me." His editor took a long breath. "Then get someone who can stand beside you, someone the public already believes." Eli paused. "You mean Crockett?" Exactly. That same evening Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her D.C. office, the lights low, her desk covered in letters, handwritten notes from parents across the country thanking her for defending their kids' privacy. Some shared stories of online harassment, others simply wrote, "Thank you for reminding us that decency still exists." She read every one because it grounded her in ways headlines never did. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Congresswoman Crockett," a man's voice said. "I'm Eli Raymond. I'm investigating the Barron Trump leak, and I think I know who's behind it." Jasmine straightened. "Why call me?" "Because you were the only one who didn't use it for advantage. You treated the kid like he mattered." She breathed in slowly, then said, "Come to my office tomorrow. Bring everything." The next morning he arrived carrying a thick folder. Andre eyed him carefully before letting him in. Jasmine motioned for him to sit. He opened the folder. Across her desk, transaction logs, IP traces, even a few internal emails. "It was never about Barron," he said. "It was about chaos. They wanted to damage the Trumps and watch who benefited, and then flipped the backlash onto anyone who stood up." Jasmine frowned. "So the leak was bait?" "Exactly," Eli replied. "When you defended privacy you gained moral ground. Now they're trying to twist that into saying you staged it for attention." Andra muttered, "That's unreal." Eli nodded. "It's also smart. They counted on you doing the right thing." Jasmine leaned back, absorbing it all. "If we expose them they'll scream fake news." "They will," Eli admitted, "but if we're silent they win anyway." She met his eyes. "Then we don't stay silent." That night Jasmine met with 2 trusted colleagues inside a quiet Georgetown restaurant, their conversation nearly drowned out by clinking glasses and soft jazz. "Ivy reviewed the documents," she said. "Someone paid to manufacture the leak, then let it spread fast enough to injure both sides. We need a congressional inquiry, not for politics, for truth." Senator Grace Hollins lifted her cup. "Do you have evidence strong enough to withstand the headlines?" "I have enough to begin," Jasmine answered. Grace nodded. "Then you'll have allies, but be cautious. The people financing this fear exposure more than defeat." Meanwhile word of the meeting drifted not to the press but to Melania's circle in Palm Beach. Her aide quietly reached out requesting a private line. The call came late that night. "Mrs. Trump would like to speak with you," the aide said off the record. Jasmine hesitated, then accepted. The next evening her phone rang. Melania's voice was calm. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "You didn't have to defend us, but you did." "I know what that cost," Jasmine replied gently. "Nobody should have to choose between politics and basic decency." There was a quiet pause, then Melania said, "Be careful, Congresswoman. You're approaching something powerful, and they don't like being revealed." Then the call ended. Jasmine stared at the screen, realizing how far the roots of this went. The story wasn't about her anymore, or even the Trumps. It pointed to an entire system built on manufacturing outrage. But before she could act publicly, Eli uncovered one last missing piece, a detail that would stun even her. Days after Melania's call, Jasmine sat reading Eli's latest email. The subject line was one word: confirmed. Her pulse quickened as she opened the attachment. It was the final link, a verified payment from Blue Core Strategies, a shadow donor front named Cedar Way Initiative, infamous for covert influence operations. The memo spelled it out: Engagement Project Phase 2 activation. Below it Eli had written they used Barron as bait. Phase 2 was you. Jasmine inhaled sharply. So that was the blueprint. They had engineered the leak, waited for her to defend a child, and then planned to weaponize her integrity against her, playing both sides of outrage and morality. And she'd nearly walked into it. Tandra stepped in with coffee but froze when he saw her expression. "You found something?" She handed him the printout, read it twice, disbelief turning to anger. "This is manipulation on another level." She nodded once, firm and steady. "Now we take it public." Andre hesitated, his expression tightening. "Are you sure? Going up against this means donors, media machines, maybe even people in your own party." "That I'm not here to protect reputations," she said. I'm here to protect truth.by mid-afternoon, Jasmine's team was quietly coordinating with Eli, combing through every document. They checked timestamps, traced accounts, consulted cybersecurity experts in Austin. Piece by piece, everything aligned. The story had no cracks, but before she stepped forward, she needed one last conversation with Melania. The next morning, Jasmine's car pulled up discreetly to a private residence near Palm Beach Gardens. Inside, the meeting was brief but weighted. Melania greeted her without cameras, staff, or spectacle. "That I know why you came," Melania said. "They wanted both of us to fall." Jasmine nodded. "And they almost succeeded." Melania studied her closely. "You speak with conviction. Be careful, conviction scares those who thrive on chaos." "That I'm not backing down," Jasmine replied. Melania gave a small, knowing smile. "Then say the truth loudly. Once people hear it, they can't unhear it." Later that week, Jasmine stood at the Capitol steps for a press conference. The morning was hot, bright, eerily still, the kind of stillness that comes before impact. Reporters gathered quickly, sensing something big. She stepped up to the microphone holding a single folder, the evidence Eli had uncovered 2 weeks ago. This nation was tricked into believing a teenager's private information was leaked, she began. That story was manufactured by a network of digital operatives who profit from division. A low wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Cameras snapped in rapid bursts. Jasmine continued, her voice sharp. "Even worse, those same operatives planned to twist the reaction, your reaction, into part of their marketing strategy. They weaponized compassion." The statement stunned even her staff. This was no longer just about privacy. It was about the industry behind outrage. She held up a page. "Here is the proof. Money moved from a political firm to a marketing shell company, to the creators of the fake documents. It wasn't an accident. It was an operation." Questions erupted instantly, voices overlapping. Jasmine raised a hand. "I'm calling for a full congressional investigation into coordinated misinformation campaigns targeting private citizens for political gain. This isn't partisan. It's human." The footage spread faster than the original scandal ever had. Within hours, major networks carried the story live. Pundits who once dismissed her now dissected her words like evidence. In Los Angeles, Eli watched from his apartment, drained but relieved. For once, truth was trending. But the backlash came just as quickly. Anonymous accounts flooded social feeds claiming Jasmine fabricated evidence. Tabloids accused her of grandstanding, and the same consultants who engineered the original leak began whispering to reporters that her files were doctored. Andre slammed his laptop shut. "They're trying to bury you." Jasmine stayed calm. "Let the facts be louder." That night, walking home under the streetlights, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "You've made powerful enemies. Watch who you trust." She didn't respond. She'd seen threats before, yet something about this one felt colder, more deliberate. She knew the cost of truth, and she knew there was no turning back. Across the country, people were waking up to how easily outrage could be sold to them, how stories could be engineered for control. Jasmine had given them something dangerous. Perspective. In a quiet act of defiance, Melania released a short public statement the next morning. "Families deserve privacy. Congresswoman Crockett is right to demand accountability." It was her first public comment since the chaos began, and it landed with the force of a confession. But just as the truth began to stick, Eli uncovered a new layer, one that would shift everything Jasmine thought she knew. The next morning, the city woke to another shock. Eli's follow-up story dropped at dawn. Across the National Ledger website, the headline blazed: "Political operatives linked to Barron Trump hoax tied to high-profile media." Consultant, the name was Trent Maxwell, the same strategist behind the smear campaign meetings in Washington weeks earlier. Eli had found direct correspondence between Trent's firm and Blue Core Strategies, payments labeled as narrative testing. The emails outlined how to bait both conservative and liberal audiences simultaneously, using privacy and family integrity to spark mass engagement. It was a psychological operation dressed up as public discourse. Trent's name exploded across the media. He denied everything, calling the emails manipulated, but the damage was already irreversible. Networks replayed Jasmine's press conference with a different tone now, one that sounded like respect. In her office, Jasmine watched silently. Andre rushed in, tablet raised. "You've been vindicated. They're finally admitting you were right." She didn't smile. "Nobody wins when truth takes this long," she said quietly. It just proves how broken the system is." Her phone rang. Eli, they're coming after me now, he said, voice trembling. I'm getting threats, they won't silence you, Jasmine told him. We keep everything in the light. That afternoon, a bipartisan committee announced an inquiry into coordinated misinformation networks. They asked Jasmine to co-lead the hearings, a symbolic but powerful acknowledgement that she had forced Washington to face something it had ignored for far too long. At the same time, the Trump family pulled away from the spotlight. Melania released a brief statement thanking those who chose decency over division, widely interpreted as a nod to Jasmine. Privately, she reached out one final time. That you've done something rare, Melania said. You told the truth, and it stayed true. That doesn't happen often, Jasmine smiled softly. You helped. Your grace kept the focus where it belonged. Melania paused. Grace doesn't stop the world from being cruel, but it makes cruelty harder to defend. They spoke for only a few minutes, but both women understood, this moment had outgrown politics. It was now about something much larger. It was about two people who had been turned into pawns by a game they never agreed to play. In the weeks that followed, the hearings drew massive public attention. Eli testified first, presenting the digital trail that linked fake accounts, marketing firms, and political donors. Then Jasmine took the floor, addressing the committee in a calm, unwavering tone. What happened wasn't an isolated attack, she said. It was a test to see how fast we could be divided, how quickly our empathy could be turned against us. We failed that test once. Let's make sure we don't fail it again. Her speech became one of the most replayed clips of the year. Outside Congress, something unexpected began happening. Parents groups, journalists, and even high school students organized online campaigns under a single slogan, #HandsOffOurPrivacy. It wasn't about politics, it was about protecting families, regardless of who they were. Meanwhile, Trent Maxwell was subpoenaed. He tried to claim ignorance, but leaked messages revealed his firm had received bonus payments for successful public confusion metrics. When that detail surfaced, even his allies abandoned him. One night, Jasmine and Andre watched the news together from her office couch. Trent's photograph filled the screen as the anchor reported that Maxwell's clients had begun severing ties, calling his tactics unethical and dangerous. Andre looked at her. You could have turned this into a career-defining scandal for them. But you didn't. You stayed measured. She nodded. I didn't need to destroy anyone. I just needed people to see. He grinned. You know, you've become the face of political integrity, right? She laughed softly. If that's true, it's a sad commentary on how low the bar's gotten. Still, there was pride behind her tired eyes. Weeks later, Eli flew to D.C. to meet Jasmine in person for the first time. They sat at a small cafe near the Capitol, both looking worn but relieved. You ever think this would end like this? He asked. She stirred her coffee. I didn't think it would end at all. He chuckled. You know, most politicians would have turned this into a campaign. I'm not most politicians, she said with a faint smile. They sat in comfortable silence before Eli added, you gave people hope, real hope. Not the kind they put on posters. Jasmine looked out the window at the fading light. Hope's fragile, but if people remember that decency still matters, maybe that's enough. That evening, as she walked back toward her office, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Congress passes preliminary bill for digital privacy protections. It wasn't final yet, but it was progress, something tangible born out of chaos. Standing on the Capitol steps, she looked out over the city lights and thought about how it all began. A fake tweet, a storm of lies, and a decision to speak when silence was safer. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. But before the cameras turned off for good, Jasmine had one last message to share, a reminder of why standing up for truth, even in chaos, will always matter. 2 months later, the noise had finally faded. The hashtags that once ruled every feed were gone, and news anchors had moved on to new controversies. But the story of the DNA leak, and how it backfired, remained in people's minds like a scar that refused to disappear. In Washington, the Digital Privacy Reform Act, the bill born from Jasmine Crockett's fight, passed its first major hurdle in Congress. It was a modest start but symbolic. For once, both parties had found rare common ground on something simple yet vital, protecting what should never be public. That morning, Jasmine stood before the press once more. There were no flashing headlines this time, no chaotic crowd shouting questions, just a small group of reporters. The same ones who had once doubted her. She wore a plain gray suit, spoke calmly, and thanked everyone who had contributed, from cybersecurity experts to everyday citizens who demanded accountability. This bill isn't about Democrats or Republicans, she said. It's about parents who worry every time their kids post online. It's about truth in a world that sells lies faster than it corrects them. We can't erase what happened, but we can learn from it. The reporters nodded quietly. There was no hostility, no spin, just respect. After the briefing, Jasmine returned to her office. On her desk sat an envelope with no postage and no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. She recognized the neat, deliberate handwriting immediately. Truth is still truth, even when it's inconvenient. Thank you for remembering that. Empty. Jasmine smiled. She slipped the note into a drawer beside another she'd kept from months earlier, the one from a stranger that had simply read, "You didn't have to say that, but you did." Both reminders of why she'd spoken up in the first place. That afternoon, she met with Eli Raymond one last time. The two sat in a quiet park overlooking the Potomac River. Fall leaves drifted across the water, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Eli looked tired but peaceful. "You realize you changed the narrative, right?" he said. "Nobody's going to look at fake leaks or gossip the same way again." Jasmine shook her head. People forget fast. Something new will always come along. But maybe next time they'll think twice before sharing something cruel. He smiled. "That's enough for me." They sat in silence, watching the sky turn orange. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed out of it?" Eli finally asked. "Sometimes," Jasmine answered. "But then I remember the kids who wrote to me. The mothers who said my words made them feel seen. That's worth any headache." Eli nodded. "You've got a way of making politics feel human again." She chuckled softly. "Let's hope it stays that way." Later that evening, Jasmine returned home and turned on the news. A small segment mentioned her bill again, brief, almost casual. The anchor said, "It all began with a fake leak and ended with a rare moment of unity." She smiled faintly and whispered to herself, "No, it didn't end. It started something." In Palm Beach, Melania Trump watched the same report from her living room. Kara entered carrying tea. "They're crediting you and Jasmine for changing how people talk about privacy," she said. Melania's gaze stayed on the screen. "We didn't change how they talk," she replied. "We reminded them to listen." For a moment, Kara thought she saw something rare, the faintest trace of relief on Melania's face. That night, Jasmine scrolled through her social media feed. The noise had quieted. Her mentions were filled with stories from people thanking her, not for politics, but for humanity. A teacher from Boise wrote that she'd used Jasmine's interview to teach students about empathy online. A nurse from Detroit said it helped her forgive someone who'd spread rumors at work, and tucked among the comments was one that stood out. "You made me realize I don't have to hate someone to disagree with them." She read it twice, smiling. That, she thought, was the real victory. As the day came to a close, Jasmine stood by her window, the Capitol dome glowing in the distance. She thought of everything that had happened, the lies, the outrage, the brief alliance between two women from opposite worlds, and how truth had somehow survived it all. "Outrage fades," she whispered. "But character stays." She turned off the lights and walked out, leaving her office quiet except for the hum of the city outside, steady, restless, alive. Before the final credits of that story could roll, one message lingered, one Jasmine had repeated many times, but meant now more than ever: when lies become currency, truth becomes rebellion. Choose rebellion. If you followed this story, remember this: privacy isn't a privilege, it's a right. And when someone stands up for it, even against the noise, they deserve to be heard. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of that. Stories about courage, conscience, and the rare people who still choose truth over spectacle.